Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth, also known as the Continuum Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, the Game Master, and I actually already recorded today's video, but YouTube deleted it for some reason. I think some of the wording gets a little too spicy, so I'm going to try this again. We're going to be a little less spicy this time, and we'll see what happens. Before we dive in, though, be sure to smash that like button, ring the bell so you know when I upload stuff, and make sure you're subscribed. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. That said, our prologue actually begins in the 1980s when a villain known as the Anti-Monitor almost destroyed Earth K. Several prominent superheroes were thought to be dead at the time. One was Barry Allen, better known as the Silver Age Flash. It would take a while for this to be revealed, but during the crisis on Earth K, the helmet of Dr. Fate was shattered while Dr. Fate was trying to save various heroes who would have otherwise passed away. Each one of these heroes then finds themselves in a different decade where they are searching for a fragment of Fate's helmet. If they can somehow find a way to put it back together again, then perhaps they can find their way home. Which brings us to the main plot of this game. Barry Allen was struck by lightning in 1956, and he was active as the second Flash for about 30 years before he vanished in the crisis and found himself in the Old West. Barry had grown up on the westerns of the 1950s and couldn't think of a better era in which to live out his retirement years. That is, until various outlaws of the era got to be a problem, and when the local sheriff was taken out by these desperados, Barry was forced to return to police work, this time as Marshall Allen, fastest gun in the West. Between 1888 and 1891, Jack the Ripper terrorized England, and when the British authorities came close to catching him, he headed west. In the 1890s, the Whitechapel criminal stalked the West, now preying on saloon girls. News of this spread like wildfire, and every Western character from comic books that you can think of came gunning for Jack the Ripper. Jack did his thing in Salt Lake City, Utah in the mid 1890s, which just so happened to be the home of Aramis Pendragon, son of Arthur Pendragon and Morgan Le Fay. His father had the Old West equivalent of the Playboy Mansion here, taking advantage of the laws the Mormons had established regarding polygamy. So when Jack the Ripper came to town, these girls got nervous. Aramis had just returned from Europe with Ulysses Bloodstone, where they had fought Dracula, another immortal with a ton of wives. The Lone Ranger used silver bullets in our game world because a pack of werewolves killed his brother. And while he and his best friend Tonto normally deal with skinwalkers, they too sometimes deal with other supernatural threats. And as it turns out, the Weird West is crawling with them. And as such, they've also tracked Jack the Ripper here. Zorro the Third is Joaquin de la Vega, the grandson of the original Zorro. He's in Salt Lake City too, looking for Jack. A friend of the Pendragon family is the Phantom Rider, aka Carter Slade. At this point in our timeline, he wears an all-white costume that glows in the dark, and he fights crime. So he's here too. And as a brief aside, after this, he becomes the Ghost Rider of the Old West, but that hasn't happened yet. I think that's about everybody, and of course, Barry Allen. Once a forensics detective, always a forensics detective. So Barry follows Jack's trail here too. So that's pretty much our party. Barry learns that Red lives here. Red, by the way, in the 20th century is Superman Red, right? Right now he just goes by the name Red. And he finds out about the what the players referred to as the Playboy Mansion, and that the girls are the target, right? So he goes to the mansion to warn Red. And again, just as it was in the recent adventure where Captain America time traveled back to the Revolutionary War, Cap knew everything about Red, but from Red's point of view, he was meeting Cap for the first time. The same thing applies to the Flash. And I said in that video, I'll say it here too, because it seems to confuse a lot of folks. Think of Back to the Future. When Marty McFly in the first movie goes to 1955 for the first time and he meets Doc Brown, right? From Marty's point of view, he knows Doc very well, right? But from Doc's point of view, this is the first time he's ever met Marty. Okay? So that's what we're doing here. At any rate, so the Flash tells Red all sorts of stuff. And one of the things he mentions is that in the 20th century, the United States government forced those two to go to Vietnam. And the experiences that they had there made them really close friends. And then Red, at this point in his life, has no idea what Vietnam even is, right? So he has no idea what's in store for him. Aramis, Pendragon, comes to visit as well, and it's been a long time since he and his father have spoken. So Aramis fills Red in on a lot that has happened. And one of the things he tells him is that Abraham Lincoln created the 13th Bureau of the United States government to investigate supernatural threats and deal with them. And that he and his partner Robert, who's a fellow Civil War veteran, they are members of Bureau 13, and they're on the trail of Jack the Ripper. So together, they show the other player characters around the mansion, which is full of mementos from through the centuries. Captain America's shield is here, for instance, since he left it behind in the Revolutionary War episode. Red then also shows the heroes around town, and the town, by the way, was partially inspired by a game called Deadlands, and as such, it's full of weird steampunk technology. The Pendragon Oil Company has seen to it that the entire town has been wired for electricity. Some of the heroes comment that they've never even seen light bulbs before. As the Lone Ranger and Tonto walk around, Tonto notices that several of the Native Americans here are magic users, which again is taken from Deadlands. And at any rate, while they're away from the mansion, Jack the Ripper strikes. The Morrigan / Morgan Le Fay shoots him with fireworks, the noise from which alerts the men Jack's presence. So the player characters hurry back to Pendragon Manor, where they all take turns hitting Jack the Ripper until eventually he runs out of hit points. And using their law enforcement powers, Aramis and Barry lock him up in the Salt Lake City jail. Jack the Ripper wakes up and tells the heroes they'd better let him go. Marshall Allen says, "Oh yeah, and why is that?" And Jack claims that back at his hideout, there's a candle slowly burning through a rope. And once that rope breaks, the counterweight will drop and the cage door will open, releasing all of the quote unquote plague rats. The heroes discuss the situation and decide that he's bluffing, and they're absolutely wrong. Jack is not allowed to return to his hideout. There really is a candle burning through rope, and rats really are released. But it gets worse because, like I said earlier, this adventure was partially inspired by Deadlands. So these are zombie rats. The rats begin to bite people, infecting them. But the heroes don't know this yet. They're walking through town when all of a sudden Red's barber busts through the plate glass window at the front of his store and tries to bite Red. Barry Allen is the fastest gun in the West, though. So he takes out the zombie in the head, right? Normally, Barry doesn't do that sort of thing. But these guys are already dead. Red says, "That was my barber." Aramis says, "Not anymore, it isn't." The aforementioned magic, by the way, is how the dead are walking and trying to eat brains. Another zombie attacks the party, and Red grapples him, getting his arms behind his back, preventing him from biting anyone. Zorro asks if the others have even tried to cure these guys. The Lone Ranger, though, says there is no cure and instead tells Zorro to go for the heads. The Lone Ranger says they want to eat brains and most wounds won't bother them. But if you go for the head, that's how you defeat these things. And Zorro understands the assignment, so he starts lopping off heads left and right. The zombie outbreak gets worse, and the heroes are forced to fall back to the mansion where they bar the doors. In Red's trophy room is a steampunk Gatling gun, which Barry uses. Red says, if you could not shoot any irreplaceable antiques, I would appreciate it. And with that, Barry fires up the device. But because it's Barry, this works very different than it would for most users. To Barry, the time between each shot feels like an eternity. So each projectile is aimed perfectly at the zombie's forehead, and the entire thing is 100% precision. And since the zombies had been forced into a bottleneck, there are way fewer zombies to deal with now. A train rumbles by on the tracks outside, and it makes the electric lights flicker a little, which gives the heroes an idea. Since the whole town was wired for electricity, they connect the positive cable to one rail and the negative cable to the other. And then one by one, they lure the zombies onto the tracks, and they fry them, right? So that's how they keep it from leaving the town, is basically there's multiple train tracks, but at least one set is kind of like a big circle around the outside of town. So the zombies can't leave. And then Barry runs around at super speed, um, taking care of the ones inside the circle, keeping them from infecting more townsfolk. After all that, the party goes back to the jail, but Jack the Ripper is gone. Aramis puts a couple of quote unquote live zombies into a cell so that Bureau 13 can study them. When all is said and done, Barry asks Aramis if he's ever come across a broken piece of Dr. Fate's helmet in his travels. Aramis says he has not, but a new facility is being built right now called Warehouse 13. And items like that will be stored there. So over the next few years, he'll do what he can to help Barry get home again. Barry thanks him, explaining that Dr. Fate seemed to perish trying to save the characters who would have otherwise passed away in the crisis in the mid 1980s, but he's not sure. And that brings us to our epilogue. Kara Zor-El, the heroine once known as Supergirl, finds herself in World War I, where amidst all the chaos, she's exposed to a piece of black kryptonite. This creates a permanent evil twin of Kara. And that evil twin is found by a German courier in his 20s. He takes Kara under his wing and tells her he has big plans for the future of Germany and that she would make a valuable ally. The black kryptonite clone is given the title Uberfrau, and that courier goes on to become supreme leader of Germany in the 1940s. But that's a story for another day. We had a good time playing this adventure. It combined elements of earlier games, including what Wayne Birch ran in the late 80s at the Collection Connection, which I'm very nostalgic for. Specifically, some of the elements were, Uberfrau, being in World War I, Barry Allen being the Old West, Dr. Fate's helmet. A lot of that stuff was Wayne. The more Deadlands inspired stuff we added later. But at any rate, so we hope you enjoyed this one. If so, as always, smash the like button, ring the bell so you know when I upload stuff. Make sure you're subscribed. And as always, leave us a comment, as that really helps us out with the algorithm. All that said, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.